News Channel 5 Network. This is MorningLine with Nick Beres.
Good morning, everyone. Nick Beres here. Thank you for joining us on MorningLine on this Thursday. Did you know today is your last day to early vote? If not, you're just going to have to wait till next Tuesday, and we'll get it going. But obviously, elections going on, a lot of things happening here in Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, some controversy, the candidates and everything that's going on. So we thought at least to get you up to speed, maybe you've already voted like I have, but still have a lot of interest in where things are going and how it looks with voter turnout and all that. Great. If you haven't voted yet, maybe you have some questions about the amendments, things along those lines, feel free to join in the conversation. I can do my best to try to answer any of your questions. But when it comes to politics and elections, there's no one better than News Channel 5 political analyst, Patrick Nolan. Good morning to you, sir. And that is the truth.
Thank you, Nick.
You and I have been doing this for a long time. I've
yes,
learned
we
an
have.
awful lot from Pat.
I've got the gray hair to prove it. You don't yet.
You have a great head of hair.
Thank you.
You truly do.
Thank you.
You do have a great head of hair. Just want to remind folks, Pat will be part of our special election night coverage here on the News Channel 5 network. Be on the Plus from 7 to 9 o'clock next Tuesday.
That's
You'll
right.
be on there with Carrie and Rory. I think we have outgoing Congressman Jim Cooper, Lisa Quigley, Beth Harwell. It's quite a gathering. It'll be a great coverage. And there you see, starting at 7 o'clock. So, Pat, today, last day to early. Hey, I'm curious with you, your voting habits. Do you early vote or you wait for the day?
I used to vote, well, before there was early voting, I always voted on election day. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed going by the precinct. There's always a sort of an energy there of sitting on election day.
I agree.
But since early voting, and because I have to get ready to do all this here, I'm always pretty conscientious about voting early so I can have that sort of out of the way.
You're not waiting in as long lines sometimes.
Well, yeah, normally when I'd vote early in the morning, the lines wouldn't be that long. But presidential election years, it can be long. But I usually would do it there. And I usually vote, although I don't live in Belmead, I live over in the slums right next to it, and I can go over and vote there. And I usually vote early there. We voted there again a couple weeks ago, although when I went by there was quite a line when I went through there. It probably took us about, now I don't know whether people were reading the state constitutional amendments or what they were doing, but it took us about 30 minutes to get through.
Right. You know, there's been a lot of publicity, and we've covered and tried to explain some of the amendments. You can do your research, but you know as well as I do, a lot of voters go, and they haven't taken the time to prepare. And if you get in there, you have to take your time to read it, and sometimes it's hard to interpret the amendments, and I don't know.
It slows up the line.
It does. Sure. It slows it up. What is your take? What have we heard to this point what early voting looks like, maybe Davidson or statewide?
Well, of course, early voting in the midterm election year, the off-year elections, the non-presidential years, is always smaller. Sure. I don't think either in Davidson County or across the state we're going to be as large as we were in 2018, which would have been the comparable last off-year election. And I might remind you, in 2018 we had a fairly contested governor's race, more than I think we'll have this year, and we also had a U.S. Senate race. That's when Phil Bredesen was running against Marsha Blackburn. So without having a Senate race and only having one statewide race, it doesn't appear to be terribly competitive. That's going to tend to depress the turnout statewide, and I think it'll depress it a little bit here locally because we don't have Carl Dean, who was the person running for governor 4 years ago. He's not on the ballot, so there's no direct Nashville connection. Right. Jason Martin, I think, is from this area, but not nearly as well known as Mayor Dean was. So I think it's going to be. I think right now the numbers I saw yesterday for Davidson County were about 68,000, maybe a little bit more than that. One more day. Now, sometimes there's a last-minute kick, so we might see it go up, but I still think it'll stay under 100,000, which is not terrible for a midterm election, but not great. We will vote well over 100,000, if not more than that. We may vote, hopefully we'll vote more than that next year in the city's elections, but we don't vote in the city elections for whatever reason.
Sure hope that people do get out and vote. Again, today's the last day to early vote. Go do it, or it's next Tuesday. All right, so Pat, before we get into some of the races, the way things are shaping up, I always like to hear your observations. Tell me, in your mind, how big a deal is this whole issue with some of these people casting ballots in the wrong races?
Well, in terms of numbers, I mean, I think we're talking about something upwards of a couple hundred.
Yeah, right.
Although there is a somewhat alarming thing is these same districts, in some cases wrongly drawn, or at least in terms of where the ballots went, were also in effect in August.
That's right.
Now, a lot of those were at least in this county, which is where the problem seems to be. We had a lot of judges races, but those are county-wide, so the district wouldn't have mattered in that particular decision. But we had some where there were problems.
And that's what the confusion has stemmed from to some degree. However, it's been explained to us by the election officials. But the previous, the districts were redrawn. Okay, there's 3 of them now, and there's an example of one, District 5, what it looked like then, what it looks like now, and making sure. Well, is it possible that in some of these districts, the split now is the road, and people on one side of the road here and there, and so a mistake was made?
That's exactly what happened. Apparently, Metro interpreted what they got from the state, the data, to be perhaps that both sides of the road were in one district or not, and so it got. I also heard. Read a quote in one of the articles from Jeff Roberts, who's who's the local election administrator, the registrar, and he actually said that the state legislature, who drew all these lines, actually may have helped make it more confusing because they took large apartment complexes and they divided the apartment complex. In other words, usually an apartment complex would all be in one district or another. Sure. Well, depending on where you lived in the apartment complex may depend on where you voted and what district you were in. I was told before there was I've seen a lot of confusion in the community because Nashville is used to being in a county that's all in one legislative district. Right. Remember, the Republicans, in an effort to try to pick up the 5th district seat, which has been Democratic since Andrew Jackson's time, with maybe an exception during the Civil War or Reconstruction right after it, they divided Nashville into 3 different districts, and that has been part of the problem. In fact, I was told if you're familiar with West Nashville and you go out to the roundabout that's out on Murphy Road, not far from McCabe's Pub or Martin's Barbecue.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Depending on where you are in that roundabout, you can be in all three of the different districts. Yeah.
See, now you see why that can be confusing. Now, I think Roberts was saying that they identified a problem with the county's mapping software, counting homes on district boundaries, and that could have caused part of the problem. They think they've got it fixed now, but all right.
Let me just add one other comment.
Okay.
It's a small number.
Yeah.
But in an era and a time when there are election deniers and people are saying that elections are fixed or rigged or whatever, when something like this happens, it further erodes
very unfortunate
trust and confidence in people. Are these elections being held? And let me also add that here in Nashville and across the state, they've gotten high marks for how a lot of states have had lots of controversies about their elections, drop boxes, all these other kind of problems. We haven't had nearly that kind of controversy surrounding our elections, but this certainly doesn't help it.
Yeah. From your perspective, as we said, we're just talking about 200 votes. Now, if that's your vote, that's upsetting. You want to be able to know it's counted accurately. They can't be redone, so they're in there and they're going to be counted. You can't sit here and say that it's been an advantage to one side necessarily the other. I know the state Democratic Party had a news conference yesterday, very upset about this and saying, okay, maybe, the Secretary of State Hargett had a hand in this, and what's going on? We need to have this election administrator in Davidson County removed. And I'm like, all right.
Well, I expect we'll continue to see that.
Yeah.
And look, if you've been working as hard as any candidate has to work to run for office, they're not going to be happy when they suddenly find out that something's been screwed up. And so I think the Election Commission's having a special meeting on Friday.
Right.
I don't quite know exactly what they're going to
do.
I guess they're just going to rehash it, which of course will stir it up in the news some more. Hopefully people will not just hear that there's a problem, but hear that they think they fixed the problem. And so hopefully when they go, they will get the right one. Today's the last day you'll get the ballot where you can go to the early voting places when you get there. But I'll say this, when I voted first in August in the congressional races, when I went to the ballot, when I went to early voting, I thought I was in a different district. And when I got the ballot, I found I was in the 5th district. I thought I was going to be either 6 or 7.
How about that?
But that's just because I had looked at the maps, and the maps that are often printed in the paper, this is not a knock or even put online, they're not down to the granular detail of exactly what streets or where. And they don't show the line. The line runs down the middle of this street or this side of the street or whatever it is. And so therefore, the map's not drawn to scale enough to say, oh, okay, that's what the problem is.
Do you think after this election, because of this happening, we're going to hear from any candidates saying that it skewed things? I mean, with 200?
No, I don't think so, because the number of, unless we find out one of these races is...
It's like 1 or 2 votes?
If you get into that, and if it's that close, you're probably going to have some grounds or at least some controversy or talk about doing some kind of recount or an audit, so we'll see. But at this point, if it's not any larger than that, It's a little concerning. I think it's a little concerning about what they think actually impact it had in August, because that affected not just the people who voted early, but the people who voted Election Day as well.
Right.
So that could be a larger number. But again, we didn't have as many district things going on, and I don't remember any of the primaries races that were that close that would make a difference.
Yeah, I think the big picture, what you just hit on the head earlier, is that it's unfortunate this has happened under any circumstance, but especially in this day and age.
Well, at the time when
people are in a lot of bogus. Yeah, this is legit. This really happened. A lot of people are claiming, oh, there's improprieties, when there simply is no evidence of it.
But it made
this
those
is
people
proof
who say
that it did happen
people
here.
who make those kind of accusations get some credence out of this. Some people who say, yeah, you know, well, maybe they're right, maybe there is something wrong. Well, there's not probably anything wrong, but this is a bad time to have a whoops.
Right. Yeah, the big difference there, Pat, is you got a bunch of clowns out there making claims of bogus stuff and offer no evidence at all. We have the election administrators themselves here saying there was a mistake made, so this is proof. Very big difference. You can't say, oh, see, I told you. Show me proof. There's proof here. There's not proof on a lot of these other bogus claims. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, James and others, if you want to sound off, we'll take your phone calls, and then we'll get into some of these races with Pat Nolan and maybe touch on some of the amendments right after this. Stay with us.